an institution that excludes 54 African countries with 1.4 billion people, while allowing one nation to veto decisions of the remaining 193 member states in the 21st century, is simply unacceptable. The Council is, by all intents and purposes, dysfunctional, undemocratic.
That was the President of Kenya at the United Nations. But Mr. President, the reality is that the democracy and democratic stuff that you guys are going to the United Nations and be talking about, the colonial criminals who gave us this democracy, they do not even believe in that democracy. They only believe in power. If you have power, your voice will be heard. China does not practice their style of Western style of democracy, but the voice of China is very strong at the United Nations. Likewise, Russia. Russia doesn't practice their style of democracy. But if you go to the United Nations, Russia's voice is very strong there. So if we want our voice to be heard, the 54 states in Africa have to become one powerful voice. We have to unite with the continent of Africa. That is the only way democracy will work for us. But as long as we don't have the power, democracy will continue to be a mirage. I thank you very much for coming around. Please, let's go and listen to Mr. President, the President of Kenya, full speech at the United Nations. Come back and talk about it. But before we do that, please support our mission, One Africa Mission, the #1 Africa Mission. We are missionaries, and our mission is all about the unity of our continent and our dignity as a race. If we want to overcome all these challenges and let our voice be heard, we must fight for a united Africa. That is why we are here. So please, if you appreciate the sacrifice we are doing here, it is not easy. Then don't just watch what we are doing. Please, if you appreciate it, then try to subscribe if you haven't done that. And also try to share it. Pass your comments. Those of you passing your comments and liking our videos, we really appreciate it. We'll say thank you because we are learning a lot from your comments. I want us to go and listen to the full speech by the President of Kenya. Come back and talk about it.
An institution that excludes 54 African countries with 1.4 billion people, while allowing one nation to veto decisions of the remaining 193 member states in the 21st century, is simply unacceptable. The Council is, by all intents and purposes, dysfunctional, undemocratic, non-inclusive, unaccountable, autocratic, and at best, opaque.
Yes, so as I already said, our respect as African people is not going to come through speaking good English. It is not going to come because all these things that Mr. President is talking about, we have heard it before. President Mugabe in numerous United Nations speeches talk about this, but what has changed?
Supposed to be free, the 54 countries. We come to the United Nations, it's ceremonial. Every year, September, we are there. We pay lots of money to go there. And to the General Assembly, we make speeches, we go back home, year in, year out. But the bosses in the Security Council say, you shall never have the powers that we have as permanent members. And we have asked and asked and asked. And asked and asked. Reform the Security Council. I want to tell you, Mr. Ban Ki-moon, you are a good man. You are a good man. But of course, We can't make you a fighter. That's not what your mission was. We will fight a fight for our own identity, for our own integrity and personality as Africans.
Yes, that was President Mugabe talking about the United Nations have to be changed, the institution is this. We have heard it before. What we need today is unity. We need action. Mr. President of Kenya, when you first came to power, the things that our people in the Sahel are doing today that most of you are against because of democracy was what you were talking about. The unity of Africa, one currency, 1 million, all those things. That it was what you were talking about as a president of Kenya. And that was what was inspiring most of us to like you. But all of a sudden, you gone mute on those issues. And today, all that you're telling us is democracy. How can our voice be heard when we are betraying ourselves as African people? As we speak today, you have announced at the United Nations that you're going to be hosting the French Africa Summit next year. What has those summits have done for the children of Africa?
Some countries, like members of the AES, have been working hard to break the bonds of colonialism, but there are others in Africa that are forging deeper ties with imperialists and colonialists. It seems the leaders of these African countries are content with remaining as puppets for the West. We are talking about Kenya, which announced recently that it would host the France Africa Summit, coming up in 2026. Isn't it curious that at a time when African countries are breaking away from former colonial powers, Kenya is on the other side building a strong bridge connecting with colonialists? The question is why? Why has Kenya decided to host the France Africa Summit? What is the purpose of the summit, and will members of the AES attend? Let's find out.
Yes, Kenya is to host the France Summit. What has all those summits done for we, the children of Africa? And what is it that about Kenya that today everything that any nonsense, rubbish that the Western colonial criminals want to vomit on us as African people, they want to do it through Kenya? What is it about Kenya today that every nonsense that the European colonial criminals want to vomit on us, they are doing it, or they want to do it through Kenya? So, Mr. President, we, this generation of Africans, we do not want to believe anymore in this mediocratic leadership that just talk without action. Because as I said, we have heard everything that you are saying today. We have heard it before. Our leaders talk about it. They will go to the United Nations, they will talk, and they will come back, no action. That is not what we want. If you want us to take you serious, then you must start talking about boycotting the United Nations. Mama Arikana spoke about it. Boycott it. Do not.
Why are we still going to the United Nations as Africans? That is a useless entity. It's not for us. The largest voting bloc in the United Nations are the African nations. We don't have a seat on the table. Why do we go there? We go to the United Nations to vote on their issues. They pay African countries, yes, or vote with us on this issue, vote with us on this issue. Mm-hmm. We have no business going to the United Nations, period. Right. We need to tell Secretary Guterres, mm-hmm, thank you very much, but we're no longer going to attend, mm-hmm, United Nations. It's not our entity. Until we have true representation there. Goodbye. All right. I mean, it's true.
Should go to the United Nations for at least 1 year. The whole continent of African leaders go to the African Union and say, we don't want to come to the United Nations if you will not respect us as 54 states. That is what we want, action. And that is exactly what our leaders in the Sahel are proposing. And yet you people don't want, you people are even against them purposely because your colonial criminals are telling you that they are not democratic. But na democracy we go chop. In the name of this democracy, our people are still languishing in poverty. Our people are still not being respected all over the world. And yet we are preaching democracy and democratic. You think they care? The Western colonial criminals does not care about how much you talk as long as it does not affect their power. As long as it doesn't affect them, they do not care. You can talk, you can speak all the good English. As I said, we have heard it before, and nothing has changed. And nothing is going to change until we, the children of Africa, stand up and demand or unite our continent and earn our respect. But if we're going to continue talking, we can talk for all they care. Nothing is going to change. If you think talking is going to change our situation, then I can guarantee you 200 years to come, Africa will still be languishing in this condition that we are. But if we really want a positive change to come and where we can earn our respect, then we must fight to unite the continent of Africa. That is why we are here. Please support our mission. Let us all together fight for a better Africa, not just for us, but for the next generation of Africans. Thank you very much for coming around. Please don't hesitate to share One Africa Mission.